Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Black Men with Purpose podcast. For those of you joining us for the first time, it's a pleasure to have you with us. This is a safe space where we share our thoughts on a multitude of topics in hopes of helping Black males, young and not so young, overcome obstacles and challenges that can be hindrances to happiness, productivity, and success. We believe that through our experiences, successes, and failures, we can have some conversations that might help other Black males in this respective journey, or I'm sorry, in their respective journeys through this thing that we call life. On today's episode, our topic is going to be fatherhood. We've developed a handful of questions or talking points, if you will, that will provide the framework for this discussion on this episode. So, our first talking point is, why is it important for you to be a good father? And this is a multi-pronged question. So first part of it is, why is it important for you to be a good father? Then what would you recommend any man considers before deciding to become a father? And last part of this question is, how did your upbringing influence your decision making as a dad? So who wants to tackle that one first?
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in. It was important for me to be a good father because of the role model that I had. My dad was absolutely amazing. Um, he was not only my dad, but it seemed like he was the dad of a lot of kids in the neighborhood that may not have had a father in the home. So by watching him, I wanted to be like him. He was my hero, and so I wanted to emulate him. So being that he was such a good father to me, and it seemed like he was a good father to others, it was important for me to once again emulate him. What would I recommend um, to someone that's a man that's just considering whether or not to become a father? The first thing I learned, you have to take into consideration that your time is no longer your own when you become a father. Your kids' wants, needs, desires, they come first, and they didn't ask to be here, just like we didn't ask to be here, but that they're one heck of a responsibility, and it's something that you should not and cannot take lightly. Again, your time is no longer your own. And then, how did my dad influence my decision making as a dad? Uh, my dad was tough but fair. So for me it was like, that's the one thing that I really appreciated about him. If I got punished for doing something, I legitimately did something. He just didn't do something just for the sake of doing it. So I had a great upbringing, and and after I got older, I actually realized, that my parents didn't have a manual. We all realized that there was not a manual on, child rearing, raising a child, and they basically did what they learned and experienced. So what I learned that I had to do was I needed to adopt some of the behaviors that I really loved about my dad, when with his raising me, and then the things that I really didn't like, I said, okay, you know what, I don't didn't like how I felt in that situation. I need to make some changes. So that's what I did when I became a father. I made sure I adopted a lot of the behaviors that my dad had, but I also changed the ones that I was not pleased with. And I hope that made me a better father. And with that, I yield the floor.
So, why is it important for you to be a good father, or for me in this case? And there's several reasons, but I would tell you the one that's probably influenced me the most is the fact that I didn't necessarily see it growing up. And,
Mhm.
you know, my father passed when I was a baby. So, so for me, uh, just hearing the stories and understanding how proud he was to be a dad, and especially have a son, uh, I realized that you know it was an opportunity to uh, to make a significant difference, especially since a lot of my friends grew up without their dad, but their dad was walking around the city somewhere. just wasn't there. So I just realized early on that, if I'm gonna be a father, I wanted to be a good father. And and good is relative, because I would tell you kids don't come with instructions at all, and they're all different, you know. But to be principled, understand, what lessons you need to teach them so that they can grow and develop and be successful in this world. That's a huge deal. And so the second question is, what would you recommend to any man uh, considers before deciding to become a father? And the one thing that I would certainly recommend uh, they consider is the fact that, are they willing to make the commitment to be present? And sometimes I think, folks get caught with, well, I know I procreated with this young lady, but I don't really like her like that anymore. Has absolutely nothing to do with being a good father if you help bring a child into the world. And no matter what, you know, kids need both parents, and you need to be able to be mature and work through that if that were the case. But I would say just make the commitment to be present for your children, all right, because they will need you. And also understand that it's not a 0 to 18 year commitment. It's a lifetime commitment. That's literally a lifetime commitment.
Yeah, they don't
right?
go nowhere, bro.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you don't stop being dad, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So just make sure that you're willing to make that commitment. And then I would tell you, a piece of advice that I didn't get, unfortunately. Good thing I didn't end up needing it, but the fact that young men out here, sleeping with whomever, make sure that it's with someone that you don't mind having a kid with. You just never know. So I would say keep that in the back of your mind, and make sure that you're thinking about that before deciding to make that type of commitment. And then the last part, how did your upbringing influence your decision making as a dad? and quite frankly, I think for me, knowing that education was touted as a way to change my circumstances and help me achieve whatever it was that I wanted to achieve in life, that absolutely influenced, some of the things that I valued and tried to instill as a dad. Knowing that once you get something, once you get knowledge, no one can take it away from you. So get that thing that no one can take from you and build upon it, working towards whatever goals you set for your life. And you get to choose what that is, just like you get to define what success is. So it absolutely did influence me in the decisions I make as a dad.
Your kids need you. If you decide to be a father, you got to understand your kids are going to need you. If you have a boy or girl, just like Rod said, it's a lifetime commitment. They're going to need you. And I really understood this when I started. I mean, I felt like I was a decent dad before, but when I started working in the school system, and when I started working in school system where 50 and 60% of the school come from single parents household. I remember I did it a Dad with Donuts event at a high school in PG that had almost 2,000 students. So you figure of that, it was 900 males. And we're like, okay, Well, if you got 2,000 students, you figure if there's at least one dad per child, right? Dads with donuts, you figure, okay, if only 10% show up, that's 200 dads, right? Should have been there. And I think it was like 5 altogether, you know. And I was just like, man,
Wow.
so your kids need you. That's the best thing I can say. As a dad, your kids are gonna need you. And kids don't care if you don't care if your dad is poor. You know what I'm saying? You don't care if your dad is rich. When you're a small kid, when you're 7 or less, you just want your dad present. You want your dad. If you're trying to be out there trying to help follow them cut the grass, you're trying to help them, wash the car. At least that was when we was growing up, right? You trying to help your dad wash the car. You're trying to just be with your dad. And I think when you are a father, you have to remember that your kids are gonna need you, and they just need you to show up and be great. As far as decisions you need to make before becoming a dad, most of us, I know for me, that wasn't a decision that I made together. Hey, you want to have a baby? No, let's, for some of us it just happened, right? So when it happened, but what I recommend moving forward, if you decide to become a dad, uh, like what y'all already said, Ray, what you already said, Rod, it's going to be a full-time commitment. It's not, even if you're not together, it's still a full-time commitment. You can't say, well, I'm going to be a dad this month for Christmas and then I'll show up for your birthday in June. I mean, it's a full-time commitment. And so that means being present as much as you can in your child's life, because your children are going to remember that. Your children, I don't care how, whatever memories you have of your father, as young as you were, you're gonna remember that. And so that's why it's so important that we gotta, when you decide to be a good dad, that your kids are gonna remember that. And as far as just the influence of my upbringing, I grew up kind of an old school neighborhood. My dad was present, but then Mr. Nolan was down the street, and Mr. Sonia was down the street, and the other Mr. Williams was across the street. So we had dads that were present in the neighborhood. And I grew up in a time where, if somebody in your neighborhood, an adult in your neighborhood saw you acting up, guess what? They could chastise you, and then guess what they would do? They tell your parents. So, so that, I think that was part of my upbringing, is just that whole community upbringing as a dad, but just my personal relationship with my dad. My dad was just like pretty much like Ray's dad. He ain't take no mess. Then it was always a problem if mama said, wait till your daddy get home. Then it was gonna be a problem then. But my dad, like, pretty much, he was straightforward. He was like, this is what I need to have done. If it ain't gonna be done, there's gonna be some consequences to your actions or your lack of actions. You know what I'm saying? So he was just that kind of dude. But you learn from that, One thing about my dad was crazy was even before he died, my dad was a stickler for paying his bills. The bill would come in the mail. He had an old school notebook. He would write down the day the bill came, write the name of the bill, write when it was due, how much it was due. He was still doing this probably 6 months before he died. He still, Dad, we can do pay stuff online. Oh no, I don't trust that. No, my money might not get there. So yeah, but so that influence of sticking to being present in your children's life, I said that was probably the biggest influence from my dad, is just being present.
For me, yeah, why is it important to be a good father? There are, like Rod said, there are so many reasons. I mean, one is, you help contribute to bringing this bundle of joy, or however you want to refer to your child, into the world, right? They didn't ask to be here. They did not ask to be here. So that's one reason right there, right? I mean, it's you made the decision to lay down and do this, right? So therefore it's your responsibility to ensure that you are there for that child or those children, right? And trying to be present and doing everything that you can to ensure that they are raised in a way where hopefully they're better than you, right? They make better decisions than you made, and that they are even more successful than you, based upon whatever their definition of success is. I think another reason that it was important to me, and Rod kind of stated it. I'm just going to restate it, and it's the same answer. It answers two parts of this question. The first part, as well as that third question, and how did your upbringing influence your decision making as a dad? Um, it's because my father was not present, right? So not having my father present in my life, I think that it's been my experience in hearing other people's stories over the years that in many cases, not just being a father, but in many different things, but something as important as being a father, it seems like most people tend to go one way or the total opposite way. There's not been much in between in my experience in hearing people's stories. If you have a father that wasn't present, you end up being just like him or the total opposite of him, right? And so for me, I made that decision early on when I was young. I mean, real young. I was still a kid. Wasn't even thinking about having children, but I made that decision early on in life. Um, my early teens, maybe around 12, 13 years old or so, that if and when I ever had kids, I would be present. I would be there for my kid. I would not do what my father did, right, in his absence. And so that's one of the main reasons it's important to me to be a good father. And then again, that answers that last part to a great degree as well. But the second part of the question, what would you recommend any man considers before deciding to become a father? You all had great answers for that, and I will just add a little bit to it. And I would say you would want to think about what kind of father you want to be, what kind of father you need to be. What traits did you see in your father or a father figure that you may have had in your life that you want to emulate, right? And which ones do you kind of want to stay clear of? Um, those are things that you probably want to consider. Another thing I would say is, and I don't want to get too far ahead because I know this question may actually even be the next question that we're going to deal with, but have you reconciled any daddy issues that you might potentially have, right? You don't want to carry over those sorts of things. Like if you've got things you haven't reconciled with your father, or not necessarily with him, but things that he may have done, maybe he wasn't present, are those things that you've tried to deal with, whether it took therapy or whatever the case is, so that you don't have things like that kind of lingering on when you become a father. I think that that's important as well. Um, and then the commitment, is this a commitment? I think Rod said that too, but is this something that I am willing to commit to for the rest of my life, essentially? Because a lot of people do believe that it's, once that child turns 18, that's it. It's a wrap. No, no, not even close. Now, as long as that child is alive, well into their adulthood, it does not matter. As long as they're still around, you are going to be needed. You have to be there, right? Regardless.
Right,
So,
right.
I think that's certainly something that you have to consider. And I will add one last thing to the last part of that question about my upbringing, because it wasn't just solely the fact that my father wasn't in my life, that led me to want to be a good father, but my mom, right? I have to give my mom credit. My mom was a single mom. We grew up poor, right, in the hood, all those sorts of things, and I did have some great father figures in my life. I have to point that out. But my mom did all she could, right, to raise me right, and do all of those sorts of things. So that I don't want to make it seem like we're only talking about our fathers, right, being the influence in how we grew up in the decision making, because our mothers, we are all four of us, right, and five of us if you count John, who's unable to connect with us tonight, but we all had our moms in our lives, right? So that was a huge part of our upbringing, and it influenced me greatly because she was the parent that I had in my life. So watching her sacrifice and watching the things that she did, um, also was a huge factor in me as a parent. So it wasn't just the absence of my father, but it was the presence of my mom that also played a big role in me ensuring that I could be the best father that I could be.
Yeah, that's a great point, Kev, and I think that that topic in and of itself is probably a show in and of itself.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a great point, though.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think for all, or at least most of us, we all had, women, our moms that we consider still to this day to be great women, right? So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree that can be a show in and of itself. So we might all need tissue for that episode.
That's definitely a
Right?
Mother's Day show. Definitely a Mother's Day.
You saying talking about we might need tissue for that show? I might need tissue before this one's out. So
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next one. Are there things you wish you had done differently as a father? If so, what?
Yeah.
I mean, I can tackle that first. Yeah, absolutely. No doubt about it. As the saying goes, when you know better, you do better, right? Or at least you should. And when my daughter was born, I was 27, right? She's 24 now. I wish I would have done differently. There were things when I was growing up that it was what I stated earlier, right? And you take, what are the things that you want to emulate from what you saw, and then what are the things that you want to do differently? And so for me, no offense to my mom at all, right? She was doing everything that she could, and but we're none of us are perfect. We're not perfect humans, so we can't be perfect in any role that we serve, as a father, as a husband, as a brother, as a friend, as a whatever, right? We all we can do is the best that we can do. So in seeing my mom, there were a whole bunch of things that I wanted to emulate from her, as well as some of the father figures I had in my life. And then there were things that I said, okay, nah, those are things that I don't like that. I'm going to do that a little bit differently once I become a father. But what I found was in the moments, sometimes I found myself, when I wasn't sure what to do about something, I fell back on what I saw or what was done with me, right? And that wasn't always the best decision. Another thing is, I wish that I would have listened to my daughter a little bit more when she was younger. I think I was of that mindset. I think about how I was raised, right? And kids have their place, and that's true. But at the same time, I think that because I was raised in an era where, as a kid, you didn't have much say so. Your opinion, quite frankly, really didn't matter that much. And I don't agree with that, right? I think that kids have a lot to offer, and you need to be able to listen and understand what it is that they're telling you and make decisions based on that. And so I wish I would have listened to her a little bit more than what I did. And there were times too where I was probably a little bit harder on her than I actually needed to be. And we've had a discussion about that since she's been an adult. And I apologize to her about some of those things. Like, yeah, I probably pushed you a little too much, and I don't mean physically, but when I say pushed you, but there was some areas here and there, some things where it was like, man, yeah, I probably could have handled that a lot differently and certainly better than what I did. And she understood. She understood that, hey, you weren't perfect, you aren't perfect, and you were doing the best you could with what you knew in those moments. But yeah, so I guess long story short, there are certainly some things that I wish I would have done differently. But fortunately, there was nothing that was just so significant where it was like, oh my God, I'm going to regret that the rest of my life type of thing. So next up.
Oh man, things I would have done differently. Probably maybe would have waited to be a father. You know what I'm saying? Because uh, when things happen and you're not prepared for it, I think that's how some of us were raised. It was kind of like, hey, you're here now. Let's deal with it. I think for me, I would have done differently. Just would try to have myself be more prepared to be a father. Maybe make sure I would have had a stable job. Just made sure maybe gone to school or just prepared myself financially to be a dad. Because when you're trying to struggle financially and take care of yourself and be there for your children, it can be taxing. And so it can be overwhelming sometimes, but But that's, to me, that's what I would have done different. I just think I would have taken the time to be more financially prepared to be a dad. And I don't know if you can actually ever be prepared, but
Yeah.
just like I said, just get into that rat race and just trying to take care of yourself, everybody else. I know for me, some days I'm like, man, I wish I would have waited, but that's my experience. So
Are the things you wish you had done differently as a father? I really have no input. Um, my daughter and I literally just reconciled more or less after 15 years. Um, Not because I didn't want to be there, not because I didn't attempt to be there, but because she was being fed a bunch of things that led her to believe that I didn't want to have anything to do with her. And you guys know me better than most. You know how much my daughter means to me. So for me, because I'm just now getting into more or less the role now with her at 27. Um, you know, Kevin, you said it. Listening to her. There's things that she will say. I try to listen to her. I try not to give that unsolicited advice until she asks for it. But I'm literally still learning on the fly. Because again, I sat down, I talked with her yesterday, I talked with her today, and I'm like, God, 15 years. We missed out on 15 years. There's nothing I can do to get that time back. I'm trying to maximize the time that we have left. But yeah, so when it comes to things you would have done differently or wish you had done differently as a father, I have zero input on that. So Rod, it's on you, bro. It's on you.
All right. Thanks. And, Brother Ray, I appreciate, your willingness to be vulnerable.
Absolutely.
That's a huge deal. And then second, I just want to make sure that that you get the benefit of being a great dad now with a lot more experience than you
For
would have
sure.
had,
For sure.
15 years ago. And so I'm all about, finding the silver lining in whatever hand you're dealt, and then just maximizing it from where you are. Right.
Right.
And I think you'll find we've probably seen kids that love their parents to pieces, no matter what. I've seen them out under the bridge, and no matter what, no matter how hard the times were that parent may have fallen on or what hand life dealt them, kids love their parents, and again, I think you're doing the right thing. It's just about, being transparent and open, and authentic with them. So good on you for that, man. Uh, for me, are there things that I wish I had done differently? Absolutely. I think experience provides us certain insights that we didn't have before. So there's certainly
Amen.
things that I would have done differently. And quite honestly, what has helped to inform me of what some of those things would be have been conversations, you know, with them since they've been grown,
Right.
right? Because today's generation of young people communicate way different than we did, right? Like Kev said, we really didn't have a voice, you know? Yeah, I wish you would talk in front of some grown folks.
Right.
If I want your opinion, I'll give it to
Notice
you.
it, you want to get up out that basement because that's where you're gonna be.
Yeah,
You keep
right.
talking back.
Yeah, so so yeah, so I think that there are some things, uh, and most notably, one of those things would be to be a better listener and to make sure I really truly understood what they needed from me as a dad. You know, so that's my one thing, and we can move to the next question. But I think it's a great question. And again, uh, thanks, Ray, for being willing to exhibit your vulnerability there.
Yeah,
Appreciate
man, we've had that discussion earlier on in some of our initial episodes and talking about vulnerability. And yeah, without a doubt, I echo what Rod just said there, man. I mean, it's not necessarily a easy thing to do, but yeah, your display of vulnerability there is, I think, is important to anybody who might be watching or listening. So yeah, I certainly
Brothers, and
appreciate that as well.
I
So
appreciate you, and that's why, because there may be somebody going through the same thing I went through.
Mhm.
And if I
right,
can't talk about it honestly, I'm not helping anybody. I'm not,
absolutely.
Yeah.
and that's what we're here for. We're here to help people, and that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
So, um, I will be transparent. You can
Yeah.
count on it.
And the biggest thing, you didn't
Cool.
give up, because a lot of, I mean, we know brothers be like, I'm just
Oh,
walking away from it. You
yeah,
know what I'm
for
saying?
sure.
You
Yeah,
know, you could have walked away from that and said, no, I mean, but for you to stay and say, nope, I'm gonna hang in there. If it's 12, 25, 30 years, I'm gonna hang in there. So,
right.
you get credit for
Yeah.
that, bro, because I've seen a whole lot of brothers on their deathbed. They walked
Yeah,
away and wish they had gone back and just made the attempt. So
right.
no,
Uh,
you
Facts.
you don't got
Facts.
no
Yeah.
sad story, bro. You
Yeah.
ain't got no sad
Yeah.
story.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, all right,
it.
let's
Ray.
see. As a father, were you totally engaged with your children's upbringing? How did it positively or negatively affect them?
Well, I'll start, and so I'll say, yes, engaged, uh, and I would like to think that it had, a positive impact on them. I know sitting in the the parent teacher conferences, uh, as the only dad, you know, I
Yeah.
actually felt good about that, and often wondered, where the rest of the dads at,
Yeah.
you know, uh, because it's important. One, it's important that those teachers who work extremely hard, and I think we've talked about this in previous sessions, uh, that are expected to be babysitters, disciplinarians, all the other things on top of teaching your kid. I think it's important for them to know that they're supported, especially by a dad,
Right.
especially by a dad for young men. If you have young men, knowing that like Brother Byron says when he was in the school system, if he's teaching my kid, I'm like, yeah, dude, let me know if you need anything. Give me a call. So me,
Right.
him, and the kid, we having that conversation in a little circle.
Right.
If he even acts like he wants to get out of line, don't even call me. Mainly because I want the teacher to know you're going to be supported,
Right.
Right.
and in return, I'm expecting my kid to know way more when they leave your class than they knew going in, which means I expect you to do your job.
Yeah.
Right.
Just like I'm gonna hold you accountable for that. I need to be held accountable for mine, to make sure that I'm being an engaged and involved parent that that's really leading the way about making sure that my kid is educated and that they're there to get educated as opposed to all the other foolishness that goes on inside the classroom. So I will pass it on.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say for me, same thing. And I'll keep this one rather really short because I know we have another question coming up where we're going to kind of get a little bit more into to what I'm about to say. But I was not my ex-wife, who I have my daughter with. She and I separated when my daughter was just about to turn 9 years old. So while I was not with my daughter every single day, I was absolutely fully engaged in her upbringing. right? And to my ex-wife's credit, regardless of how things ended for us, she never used that against me, right? And I will always be thankful to her for that. I really will, because I've heard horror stories, um, and I know Ray will talk a little bit about that on his end. So I was blessed and fortunate, right? To even though she may have hated me for a few years there, she never used my daughter against me, and I've always been grateful to her for that. And yeah, I was totally and fully present and engaged in my daughter's upbringing, regardless of the fact that I, didn't see her every single day. And as far as positively or negatively impacting her, I certainly, I feel like I was a pretty good dad, and she thinks that I was a good dad, which is important. So yeah, I think it had a positive effect without a doubt.
Well, yeah, here comes the horror story. I'm not going. I'm not going to tell the
Yeah.
whole horror story, but you are absolutely right, Kev. Was I engaged? In the beginning, yes, absolutely. And then next thing I know, again, the negative impact came when my daughter was being kept from me. I'm not trying to paint her mom in too much of a negative light, because hurt people. But I expected her to hurt me. I didn't expect her to hurt my daughter, and she hurt my daughter on a couple occasions with some lies to hurt me. And it eventually worked. But how did it affect my child? It negatively affected her. Again, she spent literally 15 years thinking that I can't understand why my dad doesn't love me. I can't understand why my dad doesn't want to have anything to do with me. I found that out. Unfortunately, I was at a memorial for my cousin, and they went to the same church. And I spoke with the pastor. And when I told him who I was, he has this dumbfounded look on his face. And then we end up sitting down and talking with him. Me and my mom sat with him, talked with him for about 3 hours. And that's what he said. Your daughter is sitting here saying she can't understand why you don't want to have anything to do with her, because she loves you. And I'm like, nothing could be further from the truth. I called every single day, and I did that for roughly 10 years. Every single day. She never got a message. I found out this year my daughter was in dance. I found out this year my daughter was in ballet. I found out this year my daughter was in piano. She had recitals I knew nothing about. And she's wondering why I'm not there, why nobody from my side of the family is there, because we didn't know anything about it. It negatively affected her. By God's grace, she started putting two and two together and realized, let me start asking my dad some more questions. I had promised myself when she was a little girl I wouldn't tell her anything about her mom or anything that was going on until she was 18 and graduated high school. So when she graduated high school, she started asking questions. I started providing answers, honest, blunt answers. And at first, of course, she didn't believe me, and to be expected. If you've been fed a bunch of mess for years, you're going to continue to believe that, oh, that person, my mom wouldn't do that, or my mom wouldn't do this. And then she starts putting two and two together and saw the truth was standing on its own, So I say all that to say that if you are involved in your kids' lives, if you're not involved in your kids' lives, get involved, because your kids need you. It's going to affect them positively or negatively. Again, my daughter was affected negatively. She's still dealing with it at the age of 27, and we are working through a lot of it. And through it all, she's still a very well-rounded person, but it definitely affected her negatively. So if you're not engaged in your children's upbringing, you need to get engaged, because they definitely do need you. Boys and girls need their fathers. And I can't
Amen.
stress that enough. Your kids need you as fathers. If you haven't been a father, become one. Put your big boy drawers on and become a father because they need you. So I'm going to stop because I'm getting upset and angry at the same time. So
The last part what Ray said, your kids need you. Um, I was engaged as much as possible. Me and my daughter lived in different states the first 5 years that she was born. But then once, I guess around first grade, was first grade is when we ended up living in the same city. So that was very helpful and being engaged because, like Rod said before, they gave you a chance to go to the PTA meetings. Gave you to go to the your science fair, go on field trips and things like that. And again, those things, your children, they wait for that. And I think that those events in their life will impact them positively, um, for them to understand how important it is for their fathers to be active in their life.
How can you be a full-time dad while only seeing your children part-time? Yeah, and that's kind of the one I was talking about when I said, this is going to come up again. I think that, um, for me, again, giving credit to Kayla's mom and not trying to, keep her from me or anything like that. I was, even though she wasn't with me on a full-time basis, I had the luxury, right, of having her, at least 1 weekend a month, but there was always flexibility in that, right? If I wanted to see her more often, I could, and I did. Um, and so, going to the PTA meetings, going to and being in PG County myself at the time, I'm very familiar with the Dads and Donuts because they did that every year, right? And so I was always there. I was always the only time I missed a PTA meeting, a Dads for Donuts, Kumon, um, visit where she needed it, a karate match, a soccer match, anything that she was doing, I was always there every time. The only time I missed is if I happened to be TDY. For those of you who may not be familiar with the military lingo, TDY is just essentially it's called temporary duty. But when military sends you somewhere to do whatever, not necessarily deployment, but you may have to go to a conference for a week or to a training for a couple of weeks or something like that. But so in those instances, which were few and far between, where she had something going on where I was TDY, but outside of that, I was just fully engaged and making sure that I made that a priority. That's really what it's about. You have to make that a priority. Everything else has to take a back seat to that, right? You being present and being at those events and having conversation. And the other thing that I did too was, since I wasn't able to see her every single day, obviously, I talked to my daughter every day. If I didn't talk, we at least texted. But 9 times out of 10, we talked. I called her. I would say on average, there may have been 5 days a year, maybe, right? Literally, like 5 days a year at the most, I would say, where I didn't have some sort of communication with my daughter, whether it was by seeing her, talking to her, texting her, something, right? I was just present, I was engaged. She knew. And then the other thing, too, is that her mom and I, right, regardless of what was going on with the two of us, we communicated regarding her. We may not have always seen eye to eye on things regarding Kayla, but we communicated. If something was going on that I needed to be aware of, she made me aware of it, right? And I had a voice in what was going to take place from that, good or bad, whatever it was. So just doing those sorts of things, it's all about presence and it's all about prioritizing your kid over everything else. So for me, I think that's what being a full-time dad is, even when you don't get to see your child all the time.
Yeah, so I would tell you, I think now it's probably a lot easier than it was uh, back before
Yeah,
FaceTime,
yeah,
cell
definitely.
phones with
Yeah.
cameras,
Yeah,
Mhm.
every kid having their own cell
Yeah.
phone.
right.
yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
yeah. So it really should be super easy now to be more engaged uh, and be a full time dad. even if you only get to see them in person part of the time.
Right.
You know, and again, it goes back to just being committed to being a father, and a father who chooses to have influence in their child's life, no matter what, you know. And you know, it could be harder for some than others, impossible for some because of circumstances.
Right.
But as long as you do everything that you can, uh, and you can always hang your hat on that, you know. So, so yes, I will say that, you know, that's one of the ways, and just stay engaged and be committed to it. Because again, as we've already stated, you know, your kids are gonna need you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And as they get older, their problems just get bigger and more expensive with greater consequences.
Facts.
So, you know,
Children part-time. I call it want to. It's called want to. You still put forth the effort. Like I said, for years, I called every day. For several years, I was in the same town, same city as my daughter. So I exercised my weekend visitations. You know, I never missed one. Even if I had to work on a weekend, then I made sure that I switched my weekend because I did not want to lose out on the time that I got to spend with my daughter. Um, Again, I said it again. I'm going to say it again. The phone calls, daily phone calls. I made daily phone calls up until the point where my daughter said that she didn't want to talk to me. You know, and then even with that, so I dropped from a daily phone call to 3 days a week to, you know, for about a year. Then it dropped down to about 1 day a week. Then I finally just stopped calling because she wasn't returning my calls. But again, I put forth the effort. Um, make memories. Make memories with your kids because let me tell you, they don't forget them. My daughter and I still talk about going to Six Flags and riding the Joker's Jinx roller coaster, or going to Busch Gardens, or going, you know, riding the Alpengeist down in Williamsburg. Disney trips. She just mentioned we came here to Florida. I was TDY, and I brought over here to MacDill Air Force Base, and she found a horseshoe crab shell, and she wanted to take it home, so we took it home. And then she realized the doggone thing stunk, and she threw it away. So, but it's those memories, man. And again, there's things that I will sit there and tell her. You know, I remember when we did this, and this, and she says, "Dad, I remember." And then she'll repeat everything that we did, and I'm like, "Wow, you really do remember." It was a hell of an impression on her. And then the main thing that I want to stress is you tell your kids you love them, no matter how you feel about the other parent, and no matter what that child may believe. My daughter didn't think I loved her, and I kept telling her, "I love you." You know, she wouldn't say it back. It was okay. She heard it come from me. Um, I used to think I would die before I got a chance to hear my daughter say, "I love you" back to me. And now it comes out of her mouth so effortlessly. All I can do is smile and thank God, you know? So while we were sitting here talking, she sent me a text message, and I had, you know, 4 hearts. My daughter telling me she loves me. It don't get no better than that for me. So if your child is estranged, trust and believe. If you put forth the effort, they will come back. And that's one thing I don't have to worry about now. I said this to her. I said, if I could die a happy man today, because you know how much you mean to me. You know how much I love you. And I know she loves me, you know, so they will come back around. You just have to keep putting forth the effort, even though it may seem hard. It's worth it. It's worth the effort, and just keep putting forth the effort. It's want to. I can't say that I can't stress those words any harder. It's want to.
That time. What you say?
You froze on the
You
screen for a
froze
minute,
up.
but we
Oh,
we
yeah.
got you now.
Everything y'all said. But yeah, it's a sacrifice, man. It's a sacrifice being a full-time dad when you only see your kids part-time. Um, and it's a sacrifice you got to take pride in doing, because uh when you have those in times, Ray talked about the trips and being with them and being engaged on phone calls and stuff like that. Sometimes it's gonna sacrifice, it's gonna cost you something to be present for them. But as we all can attest, if you make that sacrifice, it's going to pay off for you. It's going to pay off for your relationship in the long run. So Kayla took me to dinner for my birthday. She took me some fufu Italian restaurant in DC, right? So it was me, Kayla, Victor, and Sophie. Sophie and Victor had their own pizza and everything. So the bill
Make sure
came.
you got to say who Victor and Sophie are for people who are listening
Oh,
who
okay.
don't know who they
Victor's
are.
Victor's my son, and Sophie's the grandbaby. So it was just the four of us for dinner, right? So I thought that was cool. Then 3 generations at dinner, and so the bill came. So the bill was up there. It was over 300, right? So I'm like, hey, I said, hey, you need me to help you pay for that? You need me, you want to put it on my card, and you could just give me the money? Nope, I got it. I said, you could just cash out me later. She said, no, I got it. She said, I got my own credit card. I get 3 times the points on my own credit card. I'm like, oh, okay, then cool. Then hey, help daddy out there,
Barkeep, I need some dessert and I need a drink.
Yeah. So it's a sacrifice, man. It's a sacrifice, but it was a sacrifice. I grew up with both parents. And looking back, I realized the sacrifice, even when you got both parents in the house, it's a sacrifice when you have kids. But it's something you gotta want to do. But if on the back end, I've never seen a parent who is enjoying their children, after the sacrifice, after they got, and say, man, I wish I would have went back and spent less time with them. Right. If anything, you go back and say, man, I wish I would have spent more time with them, right? But there's nobody on this call say, man, I wish I would have spent less time. I wish I would have spent more time in Vegas, or I would have spent more time in Cancun than being with my kids, So yeah, it's a sacrifice, and it's gonna be a sacrifice. And you're gonna look at it and be like, man, I could have done this. You could have been like, I could have had this type of ride. I could have been living in this type of house. I could have had this. But when you look at the sacrifice, it is so worth it. And I think when you see that, being a full-time dad, even in a part-time situation, it's just gonna pay off for you. So I just believe that. As y'all products of that. So I salute my brothers for that.
Yeah, absolutely, and I salute all of you too. I echo that, B, because obviously we've all known each other for a long time, and I've seen each of you in that capacity as fathers, and it's something to emulate for sure. I think all of you are great dads, and Ray, even though you didn't have that opportunity until now, I know what you did, what you were doing during those years, and I see what your relationship is like with Elise now. And so, I certainly know, and even though John's not on this call or on right now, same with him. I know and I don't just say that, right, because you all are all here. I have legit seen all of you be fathers and be great at it and putting forth that effort and prioritizing fatherhood before everything else, and then I salute, my hats off to each of you for that. Did we have, I think that was the last question, I believe,
That
right?
was the last one. Yes.
Okay. All right. Did y'all have anything else before we wrap this up? Great conversation, by the way. This was great stuff. Really great stuff. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, I really hope this can help somebody just put forth that effort, man. I was just talking to a brother. He's got children in different parts of the country, and he's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna walk away. I'm like, dude, you can't, because where would they go for guidance? Because that should be us as fathers, right? We might not have the right answers, but at least be present for them to come to you. If you take yourself out of the equation, who they gonna go to? You know what I'm saying? Then they're gonna end up with, So all kind of crazy ideas, but yeah, we, you know, so I hope this is helpful to somebody, man. But we got to be present, like we said. You know, it's gonna pay off, but we got to be present.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah, and I'll just say, yeah, to encourage everyone to lean into fatherhood. You know, like you've not done anything else, right? You could be a terrible husband, uh, a terrible boyfriend, you know, uh, because you're not putting in the work. Quite honestly, that's the only reason you're gonna be terrible at it, because it's all going to require work and effort, and that's
Facts.
the thing, So you have to be committed to the work, right? If you want to be good at it or great at it, I know some professional athletes that they were always grinding to be better. You got to do the same thing with fatherhood. Quite honestly,
For
you know.
sure.
No doubt.
So yes, I encourage everyone to lean forward into it, and then you know what, uh, make sure that you're walking your kids through it, because they're gonna grow up to probably be parents as well.
Yeah.
So the things that are important for them to get to pass on, make sure you're passing that on, right? I mean, just something as simple as navigating the streets, where I came from. I would have loved to have had my dad to help me understand how to do that without having to figure it out on my own, right?
Right.
Because on any given day, so just lean into fatherhood, uh, and I always have a saying that the most important things that you'll ever do in your life are the things that you do for other people, and being a parent is the
Facts.
greatest of them all. So,
Yeah,
Right.
so
Absolutely.
definitely do that.
for
All
sure.
right, brother. Appreciate y'all.
Well, I tell you, man, I don't know. With that, wow, that's a heck of a way to wrap it up. Ray, I didn't want to cut you off. Did you have something
No,
before I?
I had nothing. I was
Okay,
just agreeing with what
okay,
Rod said. Absolutely.
okay. All right, cool. Well, with that, we want to thank each of you for taking the time to join us. As we wrap up this week's episode, I want to leave you with a quote by a man who really needs no introduction, President Barack Obama, who stated, "Any fool can have a child. That doesn't make you a father. It's the courage to raise a child that makes you a father." Until next time, peace.
Peace.